Hi everybody, I'm Jack the Raymond Raconteur. I hope you're doing well. This is going to be another Jonesy Friana's video, and I want to do a comparison of some fairy tales. I love fairy tales, loved them as a child, I'm fascinated by them as an adult. In my later adolescence, of course, I discovered there were these unexpurgated or non-sanitized versions with some extra text, little attendant symbolism, and of course, a nice dose of horror. And I want to talk about Cinderella, so I'm going to talk about the Brothers Grimm version and Ashfeathers by Franz Xaver von Schönwerth. Both of which are from 19th century Germany. Schönwerth's version was collected from Bavaria. And they're very, very similar. And then at the end, I'd like to make sort of a comparison to Thousandfurs, also collected by the Brothers Grimm, but really quite a horrifying tale, to my mind, and my reading. So where do we start with? Well, Cinderella. The name, of course, 60, 70 years on from the narrative Disney pushes, conjures up a beautiful princess and fancy balls and all of these, magic. Whereas I think the original tale, the name is not necessarily meant to conjure up a fancy ball. The cinder, or ash within Ashfeathers, refers to the idea that this character throughout much of the story is just covered in grime. She's covered in soot. She's asked, really made to do all this domestic labor by her stepmother. And she's constantly, dirty. She's explicitly asked in both tales to pick out lentils or millet from sort of an ash heap her stepmother throws them into. And she, with magic, calls the birds of the air down to pick out the lentils or the millet and help her with the task. But this is a character who throughout the story is not seen as beautiful, except for on a couple of occasions and then right at the end. And rather is throughout the story just constantly having to do labor and just very grimy. And so I think that sort of the image we have is very different when you just sort of jump into the text and what you actually find. The idea of magic is very important. The magical agent for the magical transformation is unique in each of the tales. And Charles Perrault famously made it a fairy godmother, which is an image many of us have. The version in the Brothers Grimm, to my mind, pushes all the way back to some of that, some of the religious aspects of old religions in Northern Europe and magical trees and such, like what fascinated Robert Graves. And it's a hazel tree where the father, in addition to being a terrible father, he's a bad gift giver to his daughter, and he belatedly breaks off a shoot of a hazel tree on his way home from a trip and gives that to Cinderella for her gift. And she plants it at her mother's grave and waters it with her tears. And so it's this magical tree that produces the beautiful dresses for the balls that she will attend, the 3 balls she will attend. In Schönwerth, we still have the hazel tree, but now we have a magical entity sitting there at the hazel tree to give her the dresses and help Ashfeathers along. And it's a dwarf. So, if you have the option, you have a magical fairy godmother, a magical tree, or a magical tree and a dwarf. And so I think it gets at the idea that Schönwerth's versions of fairy tales are often a little bit earthier. They feel like what you would have heard, in my reading, what you would have heard at a fireside or what you would have heard, at a tavern or something. That it just feels like this this separate version. It's much less fancy. And that gets at the idea of another key difference between them, which is the location at which the prince or the young lord sees Cinderella. Now, in common, we have 3 encounters between them at which he sees the beautiful Cinderella and falls in love with her. And that 3, of course, parallels the 3 sisters, Cinderella and her 2 stepsisters or half-sisters, kind of depending on the tale version. And so there's 3 encounters, 3 sisters, and the 3 dresses she wears for these 3 encounters. And in the Brothers Grimm, of course, it's this fancy ball. It's a royal ball. And, Perrault has that, Disney has that. And that's quite amazing. It's quite beautiful. And she's described as wearing these, beautiful gold dresses. And Pullman, in his translation, makes an interesting choice, I found in his translation, to draw an explicit connection to the Thousandfurs tale. And I'll touch on that later. But he makes it 3 separate dresses, not just 3 golden dresses. And Perrault famously has the glass slipper, which is quite amazing and cool. Schönwerth, as I said, his versions are a little different. It's not a fancy royal ball. Ashfeathers is excited to go to church. So she wears a nice dress for church. And again, to me, it feels so different to have the character in the fairy tale going to this like beautiful, majestic royal ball versus going to church. And of course, there is this sense of holiness associated, this idea that what the magical transformation is perhaps really doing is showing that Cinderella, of the three sisters, is the kindest, best, that it is her inner beauty that is being revealed in the magical transformation. It's not simply just like washing off all of the soot and grime that her name suggests, but that is actually, the transformation is showing who she is, that who she is on the inside type thing, and that is what is revealed as all of her true beauty, and that is what the prince sees, and that has there is a certain moral to that version, and that I think is what Schönwerth wants to emphasize, is that Ashfeathers, or Cinderella, is a very good person. She wants to go to church, she wants to do these things, and it's just so different from a royal ball. The dresses, again, one would wear to a royal ball versus to church are just very, very different. So those subtle differences, I think, give Schönwerth this different feel. Both versions, of course, have in common that the sisters disfigure their feet in an effort to put on and fit on the slipper. In both, of course, the slipper is captured by the prince on the third occasion, deciding he needs to find this individual. Whether it's at a ball or church, he's fallen in love, he needs to find her. He's chased her at one point, she like runs up a tree in Ashfeathers. And so he needs to find her. So he spreads, like tar along the steps so that when she runs off, her slipper gets caught in the tar. And so everybody has to try on the little shoe. And Schönwerth just has them go directly to the inn and say, hey, I chased her here. I think it's here. Let your daughters try this shoe on. And so they cut off part of the heel or cut off the toe. And I think that, again, gets at the idea of the magical transformation. Of the transformation revealed how beautiful Cinderella was. The stepsisters now, who are like selfish and venal on, inside, now have disfigured their body on the outside. And so it is made manifest for all to see. And I that's not the interpretation the brothers Grimm give explicitly. The moral they tell at the end of the tale is so for their wickedness and falsity they were punished. So I like to just take it a little bit more explicitly if that's what the transformation refers to, because the brothers Grimm end with a version that Schönwerth does not include, and that certainly Disney does not include, which is like the sisters having Cinderella is allied with the birds of the air who help her with the chores at the beginning. The labors she's tasked to do. The birds of the air come down again at the end and peck out the eyes of the sisters, and the real moral in the end of the Brothers Grimm is not about Cinderella. It's about the sisters being wicked and false and being blinded the rest of their lives, which is horrifying. It really is like when you end it that way, it feels very horrifying compared to what Schönwerth has, where he doesn't have the blinding. The feet are disfigured, but they're not blinded. Disney, of course, doesn't have that at all. And so those all seem very horrifying until we get to Thousandfurs. And as I was reading these, I read some background material by Maria Tatar, who did the Norton Critical Edition of fairy tales and edited that. And she talks about how while Cinderella has become this immensely popular tale, the other version of it that uses a different opening frame for the tale has dwindled and dwindled and dwindled, and it exists in different forms. Catskins, Donkeyskins, Thousandfurs, Mossy Coats. But there's a key difference. And the difference is this. We still have 3 encounters with the prince, who Cinderella is going to, who's going to fall in love with Cinderella. We still have those 3 encounters. And she still has 3 dresses. In this case, she has a magical, little magical container that she is able to put all 3 beautiful dresses in, and she's made to work in the kitchens, and so is this, of course, very dirty and stuff. And on the 3 different ball occasions, she puts on these fancy dresses. One is gold, one is as gold as the sun, one is as silver as moon, and the other is, to my mind, just extraordinary. It's colored like the night sky of stars. And that just sounds like a beautiful dress as a weird aside. And then each time she runs down and changes out and dresses back again as a kitchen maid. But how she ends up in the kitchen is where Thousandfurs goes to a really, really dark place. And Tatar, theorizes that the fact that these types of events actually occurred is why this tale sort of has become much less popular and not retold. And it is that frame narrative is this: the king, when the wife dies, promises her not to marry anyone who is as beautiful as she is, or who cannot put her ring on the woman's finger, the dying queen's ring on the woman's finger. And then decides later on that his daughter, once she's come of age, which is usually believed to be about 15 in the tales, his daughter is that one. She can wear her mother's ring, or she's the most beautiful. She's the only woman who is as beautiful as her mother, and things like this. So we now have this, really, really disgusting and sinister and terrifying version where you have a man, and specifically a man in power, not just viewing women as plunder, but his own daughter in that way as well. And the Thousandfurs refers to the idea that she sets this impossible task, saying, like, I will not have anything to do with this. So I want a coat made out of a fur from every animal in the kingdom. And he sends all of his hunters out to do this. And it just shows like the level of depravity to which the king will go to sate this, like totally unholy desire that he has. And that ultimately she's presented with this cape of 1,000 furs, and she is presented with the three dresses, the one that's gold as sunlight, as silver as moonlight, and the amazing shimmery gleaming one representing the starry night sky. And that she runs off in terror at what's about to happen, escapes with her three dresses in the magical container and this massive 1,000-furred animal cloak, and is discovered in the woods by in a different kingdom. Thankfully, is discovered in the woods there, covered in this, like monstrous cloak, and they just assume she's like some type of like woods witch creature. They think she's an animal at first. And so put her in the kitchen to work there, and that's where the Thousandfurs comes from. But that version of the tale is totally different. I wasn't aware of that version of the tale until I was well into my 20s, and I can understand why nobody tells it, but I think it reveals, just the different ways in which the Cinderella fairy tale can reveal different aspects of society and of humanity. Schönwerth, it very much is a moralizing tale about inner beauty, going to church, like being a good, kind human being, and that is what is, best. The Brothers Grimm, it's that, but there's also the royal majesty going on, and there's all sorts of aspirations to it. It doesn't feel like a tale that anyone could aspire to. It very much feels like a fairy tale. And then, of course, the punishment side for the sisters. But then Thousandfurs shows a much older and more terrifying, social structure, and just a really different take. So that was a couple different versions of Cinderella. I'm planning to do at least one more fairy tale comparison, probably in about a week. But let me know if you've read these. Let me know what you think, and I hope, again, that you're doing well. Thanks.